Hi, this is Jordan Ramirez, and let me start over. Hi, this is Jordan Ramirez, and welcome to my first live stream for the Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez podcast. So I thought I would take the time to make sure I would get everything ready. For those who are ready to have any suggestions or questions, we'll have to do that after the podcast, after the live streaming event, excuse me. So, what I want to discuss about is about my podcast for those who have never heard of it before or those who have never listened to my show before. Please make sure to do that. Please make sure to comment on the chat room right next to you if you are tuning into this live stream for the very first time. So, I thought this would be a great opportunity to talk about what we are going to do for today. So, let's get started. So, if you have never heard of my podcast show, Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez, the show is basically about me talking about whatever films I would discuss about on the film reviews, whether they be films about that's better. Okay. Whether they be films about movies that I have seen, or they are art house films like from Criterion, for example, or they are films that are mainstream films, some of them are mainstream, or whether they are films that are underrated or were not successful at the box office. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to also mention to you about these films. Some of the films that I have discussed on my podcast included the movie Julie from the 1950s. I also did Star Trek 4, The Search for Spock. No, sorry, excuse me. No, I was right. Star Trek 4, The Long Voyage Home, excuse me. And I also reviewed another film that I had done recently called Pompo the Cinephile, which you may have seen my video on YouTube. It's a YouTube short that I did. It's a 15-second one. But I thought I would do that film because it was on my top watch list and it was something that I wanted to discuss about. So right now, I wanted to discuss also not just the episodes, but also for those who are just tuning in right now to also know about what is the status of my channel at this moment. So my channel right now, it's really the channel right now is just really not funded by anything. I don't have any like big advertising sponsors, but I thought this would be a great opportunity to discuss about why I wanted to discuss this in my live stream. So, as you know, I have. So, as you know, the show that I have run on my podcast, it does not currently have a sponsor or an advertisement because the advertising revenue mostly depends on the listenership of the listeners on Spotify and on YouTube. So for my listeners on Spotify, I would need at least 100 YouTube. I would need at least 100 followers to make sure I have some sort of advertising revenue so that my show can keep afloat on Spotify. And on YouTube, I would need at least 1,000 subscribers. So that means I would have to work as hard as I can to make sure I give you more shorts. I would have to give you more videos as well as more live streams like this. But that's something I thought would be pleasant for those who have never listened to my podcast. Okay, so I know that I'm going to have to make it a little bit longer because it's already been 5 minutes. So, what does my podcast mostly do? Well, my podcast is mostly consisting of film reviews, as I said before, that has to do with films that I have seen that are art house films, classic films. Sometimes there's a little bit of a mainstream film, or maybe there's a little bit of underrated or underseen film that would pique my interest. So if there are any questions or subscribe or any suggestions, maybe that would be beneficial too. But yeah, it's just something that I thought would be interesting uh, to get myself out there for anyone's attention or notice. But yeah, the show has been on for almost a year right now. I started originally at HCC in 2014. And when I was doing that show, my first film that I reviewed was American Graffiti back in 1973. Now, back in 73, sorry, not back in now back in 2014, I get mixed up in these situations. Now back in 2014, I was doing a show at HCC, and that was the first film that I wanted to review. And some of the other films that I had reviewed included films such as, if I were trying to remember them, films that I had done included Brazil, Sullivan's Travels, and I also did The Lady Eve. Those are some of my favorite movies. And I also had done, uh, and I think I also had done A Boy and His Dog. So that was something that I had done, and it was an interesting film to watch from the mid to late 70s decade. But it was an interesting movie to review as well. So because I have also started my YouTube channel back in early this year in 2023, I also thought maybe if I wanted to expand beyond what I usually do on Spotify, I thought YouTube would be another beneficial way to get myself out there. So that was another helpful tip. But I also realized that if I needed to keep my show afloat, I would also need the subscribers that would be able to watch my videos, to watch my shorts, as well as to get on the podcast bandwagon, basically. And also, because I am working a part-time job, I cannot raise a lot of money on my own so that I can be able to give you surprises or any prizes that I wouldn't give any prizes or any rewards or anything like that in order to get people's attention regarding something like this. So I thought this would be interesting to do it. But yeah, it is pretty interesting, although uh, it is not something that I would hope for. But again, I digress. Going back to YouTube and to Spotify. When it comes to getting your sponsorship on Spotify, you always have to rely on listeners who have been listening to your show for as long as you put it on the air. You also have to mention what types of movies you are doing and also the types of topics that I had done for my segment, excuse me. So what I did for my segment was something that I was inspired by doing from Seth Meyers, as well as from late night comedy show hosts such as Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, uh, Colbert, not as much, but of course, I also was admired by Jon Stewart and Seth Meyers, and The Daily Show also did some commentary as well. But what I did for my segment, which was called "Allow Me to Explain," was basically in the spirit of Seth Meyers is a closer look, which he always premieres on YouTube, and he always talks about the topics that are either political or sometimes are not so political. But I thought it would be interesting to bring that into the mold, of course. But that was what I thought would be interesting to do. So I thought if there are any topics or any news stories that maybe I have not heard of or I tried to look up, maybe there are some stories that I have not covered that you may have suggested or that you may suggest for those who are tuning into this live streaming broadcast. And also for some movies that I have not seen, I have done over 50 episodes so far of my podcast. And there's also over 50 on my YouTube channel as well for my video podcast and mini episodes. So for my regular podcast episodes, they are at least maybe, okay. So I have a question from somebody who has listened, or I have a question from somebody who has listened or maybe not listened. So there is a question. So my question is, how do you decide on which movies to highlight on your show? That is a very good question, according to my uncle, who has just contacted me on my phone, or who has just contacted me right at this moment. So how I highlight the movies on my show is basically by I judge the movies not like what Siskel and Ebert would do, which is basically a thumbs up or a thumbs down situation. Okay. Yes, I listen. Okay. My question: how do you decide on which movies to highlight on your show? Yes, I listen. Okay. So how I highlight the movie for my podcast is basically instead of a thumbs up and a thumbs down, as I mentioned before, I would just rate it based on what I like about it. Maybe what are some of the pros of the movie? What are some of the cons? Like some things that I may or may not like about this film, or any type of sequence in the movie that I think could have been improved, or maybe it could be done differently had this movie gone in a different direction. But I also talk about the history of the film and its context of when the film was made and why the film was resonant to the audience when this film was made for that period. If I don't focus on that, which sometimes I may drift off a little bit, then it may have then it may be lost to the contemporary listener. So that is how I basically rate it. So I basically rate it based on the historical context of the story, like what was the production like, what was the acting like, what was the history behind the making of this film, and also I would have to remind some listeners about what was the historical impact of the certain movies that I have chosen. Okay, so I also have another question. So, how do I choose which movies to talk about? So, how I choose which movies to talk about depends on uh, it depends on basically what are some of the people's interests, or basically what are some of the movies that I have seen or I have not seen that are out there that are basically trying to go for a mainstream or basically an art house approach. So again, I'm a little bit off topic on this one, but I'll say this. So how I choose the movies to talk about, it depends on the quality over the quantity. Basically, I'm looking for story over, let's say, spectacle, or maybe character drama over like action or an explicit content that doesn't really make me feel interested. Or if there's a mainstream film that is neither a prequel, a sequel, or a reboot or a part of a franchise, I would just try to tune out of that. I'm looking for basically anything that's original or anything that is not a remake or anything that is so outside of the studio system. I feel like maybe this film I ought to give it a try, or maybe there is something that I feel needs to be discussed because if this film has not gotten the attention it receives, you know what? I think I ought to give it a shot because there are movies out there that I may have not seen. I mean, I wanted to see this movie that was from Iran when I was in San Francisco, but I didn't get a chance to watch it. So instead, when I was in San Francisco, I watched this movie called Memoria, which starred Tilda Swinton. It was made by this Thai filmmaker. I don't know his name at the moment. I think his name was Apichatpong Weerasethakul. But that's an interesting film for me to watch because it was on the art house film list. And yes, so again, I wanted to also mention to my uncle David, who is listening to this live stream right now. Actually, he doesn't have a Google or YouTube account. So how do I choose the movies I talk about? I choose the movies that are based on that I think have high quality in terms of I choose the movies that I think are interesting based on whether or not these films have artistic quality and content. So again, that's something I wanted to discuss about as well. But there are people out there that have never heard of a podcast that focuses entirely on just doing one portion of it is focused on the movie review, and then the other. What are some of the biggest surprises that I have encountered so far? Okay, so some of the biggest surprises I have encountered are the fact that okay, I'll give one example. Okay, so when I was reviewing for this one film that I was going to do called actually when I was going to do a review for the short films I had done at the festival, let's put it this way. I was a juror at the Gasparilla Film Festival, and some of the biggest surprises I've encountered are basically like how some of these narratives could go from, let's say it's a nonlinear narrative, or how about let's say something like Memento, in which the storyline is somewhat going backwards from end to the beginning, and then all of a sudden, when you think you get the pieces together, sometimes they don't fit because there may be some gaps within these moments that I feel like I'm trying to figure out what's going on, or maybe at first I thought that the main hero was actually a good guy, but it turns out the main hero actually did something terrible to his own spouse instead of the other way around. But that's just not something that I had done for my podcast. But in terms of surprises I've encountered so far, my God, there are so many films that I have encountered that are surprising. But in terms of the surprises, I would say the movie that I had reviewed, not just Memoria, which I thought there was going to be something surprising, but instead it just was extensive long shots, extensive long takes that almost took 3 to 5 minutes. But if I had to pick a movie that I thought was surprising to me, um, I don't want to put it this way, but Jean-Luc Godard's movie. I know I haven't done it for my podcast, but Jean-Luc Godard, he did a film called Goodbye to Language, which I thought was one of the most intriguing, if not most surreal, pictures that I had watched, and it's very experimental. So if you have never seen this film, it's on Canopy, or if you have a Criterion channel, you can go watch that as well. So the film is basically just about a man, a dog, and a woman, and it's not in that particular order. But what it does deal with is language. It deals with literature, and it also deals with experimentation. Like, how do you see things that are so beyond the means and the norms, of course. But that was what I was thinking about when I was watching the film, but I digress. So yeah, that was surprising to me watching the movie Goodbye to Language. Um, Anything that Godard puts out on film, I always feel like I am encountering numerous surprises. Or films by Anya Svarda. Anything that has to do with Brechtian storytelling or storytelling that has nothing to do with the main story, it just feels like those are some of the big surprises that I have encountered. But that's one of the things I noticed. But anything by Anya Svarda, uh, anything by Jean-Luc Godard, and the one French film I'm trying to remember. Oh God, this one was really good. Holy Motors. If you have never seen this film, you should check it out on either Amazon Prime or on Canopy. Directed by Leos Carax, I think his last name is pronounced that way. And he also did a film for Amazon Prime called Annette, which I thought was one of the strangest, if not the most surprising movies or fairy tale films that I have ever seen. Because it consists of a man who is supposed to be a comic, and he's not really that entertaining. He's more like what you would call a comic who does performance art, and it's very controversial. He's married, or he's engaged to his wife, who was an opera singer, uh, played by, oh gosh, what is the name of that? I'm I'm blanking out on the actress's name. The winner for La Vie en Rose. I'll get back to that later. Oh no, Marion Cotillard, and that's it. And the fact that their baby in the film is portrayed by a marionette. If you have never seen this film, it's really wild. It's really offbeat. The only complaint I have about this film is that even though I'm not an Adam Driver fan and I never understood what is the appeal with this actor, I always find him to be either not that good at acting or maybe he's just trying to act. But the one thing I remember watching about this film was that he is not a good singer, not a good singer in my opinion, and he is terrible at it. I mean, Marion Cotillard, she's not singing. Her voice was dubbed by somebody else. Her singing voice was dubbed by somebody else. And of course, it's supposed to be like an opera. It's supposed to be like a musical opera involving a comic who marries an opera singer who's known for portraying the same character, a tragic heroine, basically. And also, she gives birth to a baby puppet that one would think it's so insane that this movie ever got made, but it did. I mean, it's a wild movie that I enjoyed, but at the same time, I felt annoyed by Adam Driver because of the fact that I never thought of him as a great leading actor or singer. I never thought of him that way. Okay, so I got another question. I really like the show format. How do you decide on topics for the second half? Okay, so when I decide on the topics for the second half, I always think about what are some of the stories that I try to stay away from, like whatever is going on the mainstream news circuit, like anything from MSNBC, CNN, or let's say any of the big broadcasting cable networks. So what I try to focus on are stories that either impact like certain minority communities, like those who are in the disability community, those who are Latino, those who are engaged in voting rights, or those who are engaged in other topics that I feel are real news and real stories that must be covered. Because whenever I try to find any good stories, it's always basically overblown by something that's already been covered, but they're just reporting it anyway. So, to answer that question, I decide the topics based on maybe independent source websites or sources that deal with topics that are underreported or not as discussed as much often as I hope they would be, but also on stories that I feel are local. Local stories that are in the state of Florida, or maybe that are maybe around my county, like Hillsborough County, or anywhere else that deals with these situations. Just recently, I just got as I was going home, I saw this horrendous video that was posted on Instagram by the great Anna Eskamani and the great Thomas Kennedy for the Florida Democratic Party about the governor signing the 6-week abortion ban. That's when you listen closely to this video that was not reported, except somebody recorded it and it somehow got into the main and somehow got into social media. He was desperately asking people to clap for him signing this bill, which I thought, oh my God, that's sort of a Jeb Bush moment right there. But I mean, he may be pathetic, but he's a dangerous, pathetic man, in my opinion. But I also try to focus, I don't try to focus on the distractions because I do believe there is such a thing as distraction culture, which is the idea that you would distract real news with something that is unimportant. So that's my definition of distraction culture. Anytime you see an important figure, like a public figure who's basically gaining the attention 24/7, that's not news to me. I always want to see news that are underreported on those who are everyday people, those who are fighting for the rights of whatever is going on in this country at this moment. And also, I try to focus on some entertainment news as well as what is going on at certain festivals. I did the Gasparilla Film Festival. I know I haven't done the Cannes Film Festival, but I did cover the Annie Awards. If you have never heard of the awards show, I had covered that on my podcast. So I thought I would give that a shot as well. So that's another show that I wanted to focus on, another topic. But I always try to find whatever news websites or news sources that don't get as much attention as big as was hoping for them to get on. But yes, that is the answer to my question. Just anything that is not reported or anything that isn't as discussed as one would hope it would be, and also on stories that affect certain communities, but as I said, they don't get reported. Okay, were there any trends that I saw when watching all those short films for the festival? Okay, so when it comes to the trends for the short films, I have never before seen short films. Okay, let's just say this. The trends that I noticed in some of the short films as I was watching them at the festival were almost focused entirely on trying to be original or trying to pay homage, or there were some of them that were shot. There were a few of them that I noticed were either shot not in the state of Florida, but were filmed out of state, like in California or in New York, where they tried to use the RE red cameras. So that's the sort of trend. They were trying to be more cinematic. They were trying to have more of that cinematic feel with these big, high definition digital cameras that I've been noticing. And I think there was one film that was shot that used a drone shot that I thought was clever and interesting. But the trend that I notice is basically in technology. The trend in technology for cameras and for photographic lighting, and also in terms of trying not to be using too much CG effects. So that was something of a trend that I noticed. It's basically the upgrade in technology for cameras and for lighting, and also the fact that they had used whatever type of camera sources that they could use for these short films. Um, and I noticed that some of them, uh, okay, so what was it like to be a juror on a festival? To be honest, I love it. I love to be the juror on the festival because it gives me the experience to watch as many films as I could possibly sink my teeth into. It gives me the freedom to understand what types of films I may or may not have seen, and also the types of storytelling and themes that each of these short films covers. Uh, some of them I notice focus on LGBTQIA plus themes in which you have the main protagonist. There was a short film I liked. Well, not liked. I wouldn't say like. I felt was interesting, and it was about an openly gay man living in New York. He's Latino, he's gay, and he at first has this romantic interest in this other guy he meets at a party, and that was something that I thought was pretty interesting, and I think there was another short that I saw that also focused on LGBTQIA+ themes. But there was another short that I liked, and I thought it was so prescient and it was so relevant in today's environment. And that, of course, was the film Gunpoint. It's an absurdist short film that was about a man who owns his own house. It's basically about a homeowner who one day opens the door and he sees a man pointing a gun at him, and he asks him for 12 cents, and he claims he works for the United States government. And then there's another guy right next to him. He also claims that he works for the United States government and he wants $1. And then there's another guy, he wants $1.25. And it's one of those absurdist shorts. I love it, but at the same time, it's so relevant in today's environment because of the situations with the mass shootings we experience in this country. And also the other short film that I also liked were there any Gen Z filmmakers represented at the festival? Okay. Um, okay, so when I was watching the short films, I actually didn't get a chance to see any of the filmmakers who were Gen Z. If they were, if there were any Gen Z filmmakers, I would say there was at least, I was watching 24 short films. I would say there were at least half of them, maybe around like 10, 11 directors who were Gen Z filmmakers, or maybe less. But the answer to that question is I don't know. I don't know if there were any Gen Z filmmakers who represented these films, narrative short films or feature films, because I wasn't there. So that answers the question. So I don't know if I ever got a chance to meet any of them. Only at the last day of the festival did I get a chance to meet them, or did I get a chance to see some of the winners coming up to receive their awards. But it would be nice to actually meet some of them. But in terms of finding the right short films, or Gen Z filmmakers, I would say there were a few that I think I could read from this. One was a short film that I liked about this young boy who was possessed by this tree, and I thought, okay, that feels Gen Z to me. Or the one that was shot in New York or maybe in Wyoming, that felt Gen Z to me because of the situation with the violence towards women. And I thought that's an impressive short film that feels more Gen Z to me. That represents what the current generation is going through. Um, but yeah, I have not had a chance to meet any of the Gen Z filmmakers who represented themselves at the festival. I am hoping maybe the next time I go to the festival that this time I would just go straight to meeting them firsthand, going to see them at the theater and for a Q&A session, and then maybe ask them some questions or maybe just get some pictures with them if they're available. Okay, please describe the judging process for the film festival jurors. Okay, so for those who have never done a jury board before, it's basically this. You are given a chance to watch as many films as you can. For me, I had to watch 24 short films, and I had to rank the short films based on what were some of the pros, what were some of the cons, and what were some of the things that maybe the filmmaker should have done the short film a different way versus how they originally wanted it to be done. And I felt that that was what I was doing for the judging process. Um, and there were some things that I either liked about the short film or some things that I wish they had done better to make it even more interesting than what I currently saw on the screen. But in terms of the judging process afterwards, once I have evaluated the scores, like let's say the highest I would give would be a 9 or an 8, I then talk with my co-jurors who I got a chance to meet at the festival. So what we do is we elaborate on the best short films that we think from the four different categories are the best short films, or like which ones are the most interesting to us. And if we agree on like the top three, then we have to narrow it down to just one film. So once we do that, once we elaborate and once we are able to figure out what is the short film that is the winner for the festival, then it is ultimately up to then we decided that this is the short film that should win this category, or maybe that if there is a disagreement, we may have to persuade the other juror to agree with us on this film. If not, then we would have to agree with this other film, just to get the other juror to go along. So basically, I rate it. So the judging process is basically this: you review the film, then you look at the pros and the cons of the film as you are writing the reviews and you are taking notes, then you have to rate it based on what are some of the good things about this short film and what were some of the things that maybe were not so great that there needs to be an improvement on. And then once you get all the short films on a score between 1 to 10, then you have to think about your top rated short film that has the highest score. For me, I had to choose like the three best short films that I thought were interesting. And then once you have figured out the three best short films that you liked, or once you have figured out like the top maybe like 5 or 10 films that you think should win the contest, then ultimately you have to talk to your co-jurors because it's a collaborative process. It's not a I said she said process. It's basically a we said process. So once we have to decide what short film we like, then ultimately we select the winner, and then tell it to the we tell it to the person at the festival, the film that we decided which is the best film to put out for the main award. Then that film is selected as the winner. So that is the process of how we do it, just based on the rating, the pros and cons, the collaboration, and also trying to find some cooperation. What's the community like around the festival? Okay, so the community when I was there at the Gasparilla Film Festival, there were a bunch of filmmakers, they were film goers, some people who never went to a film festival before, like maybe friends or family members. It was more like a film community and also a community that respects each other in the state of Florida because as history has told, Florida was once a film beacon before California, as well as New Jersey. So, for those who are unfamiliar with the history of filmmaking in Florida, we did have a film studio in Jacksonville, and Jacksonville was considered one of the earliest film locations in the United States. before the filmmakers headed west to California because of better jobs, better wages, etc. But there is a film studio that I had heard about called the Norman Film Studio, and I did research on this. And it was located in Jacksonville, and it was the one of the few black studios, meaning one of the few film studios that was for black filmmakers, for black audiences, that made these films. And the only surviving film that they will be showing in Jacksonville coming next month is The Flying Ace, and it is the only film that has survived. But to answer the question of what the community was like at this festival, or what was it like around the festival, it was basically a film community. It was like a family. It was a family of those who love cinema, who dedicate to cinema, who are film critics, who are filmmakers, who are actors, who are trying to get acquainted in the business. For those who maybe if there is somebody who wants to make a deal, or maybe say if there were some people who worked at a film studio or maybe at a film company out west or maybe across the globe, then there would be opportunities to maybe get a chance to make it in the business, no matter what your profession may be, or no matter what are some of the biggest people that I would love to have met, but I didn't get a chance to do it. Um, I mean, there was an RSVP mentioned at the Floridan Hotel with a bunch of executives, directors, producers, people who were working at different film studios and different film companies to to make them feel welcome, to make them feel like that there are opportunities out there that they would feel embraced. And even though the business is, oh yeah, but yes, for those who have never been to the film festival, I would highly recommend going to the Gasparilla Film Festival. It's nothing like the Cannes Film Festival or the Venice Film Festival, or maybe at the Sundance Film Festival, which are some of the biggest film festivals across the globe. But in the Gasparilla Film Festival, it's basically home. It's basically home to what filmmakers, producers, executives, all these different types of people have in the business. And I think that this is a great opportunity for those who have never been there to get a chance to put themselves out there on the map. So, for those who have just tuned in, if you have any questions or suggestions, please let me know in the comments section that is right next to you. And for those who are just watching this, if you have any questions as to anything you missed, or maybe anything that I may have overlooked, now is the time to do it. If you have not done so, I will wait for at least maybe 5-10 minutes. Yeah, just to get something out there. Okay. Okay, so if there are no questions so far, or if anybody has not been able to go onto YouTube, I will make sure to remind them next time and maybe send a link so that they would be able to get a chance to watch this to get a chance to watch this live stream. So again, if there are no questions, or if there is nobody on or if there is nobody that is watching this, I will make sure to live stream next time, so that maybe I will get some sort of, so that maybe there will be some attention. Okay. Um, I will see you soon. And no, it's not see you soon. So, okay. So I don't know when I will get a chance to do another live stream. I am hoping maybe either next week or the week after. I'll have to think about that. But again, thank you for those who are watching this live stream, and make sure to listen to my podcast on film. Make sure to listen to my podcast, Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez, on Spotify, and also go to my YouTube channel. That's Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez, my YouTube channel name. And you can listen to my podcast every Friday at 4 p.m. That's the regular episodes. And make sure to listen to the mini episodes every Monday at 12 p.m. And until then, I'll see you at the movies.